Ezekiel 1. Ezekiel was posted up by the river with his people when the sky cracked open, and God hit him with a vision. This was 5 years after their king got snatched up, and that's when God put his hand on Ezekiel and showed him something unreal. Out of nowhere, a massive storm rolled in from the north. Dark clouds, fire flashing, and a glow so bright it looked like hot metal fresh out the furnace. Then, out of that fire, 4 wild-looking beings stepped forward. They had human-like bodies, but each one had 4 faces. One like a man, one like a lion, one like an ox, and one like an eagle. They had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and their feet looked like polished bronze. These weren't no ordinary creatures. They moved in perfect sync, straight ahead, never turning, like they were locked in with something higher. Beside each of them was a wheel that sparkled like crystal, and these wheels had eyes all over them, watching everything. They moved wherever the Spirit told them to go. No hesitation. Above them was something like a glass platform, shining bright, and over that was a throne that looked like deep blue sapphire. Seated on that throne was a figure shining like fire from the waist up and glowing like molten metal from the waist down. Around him was a light so bright it looked like a rainbow after the storm. Ezekiel knew right then, this was God's presence, his raw glory, and all he could do was drop to the ground in awe. Morale of the story: God is bigger than anything we can imagine, running things on a whole different level. He sees everything, moves with purpose, and when he shows up, the only right response is to humble yourself and listen. Ezekiel 2. As Ezekiel was laid out on the ground, he heard God speak. "Get up, I got something for you." Soon as he said it, the Spirit hit Ezekiel, lifting him to his feet. Then God gave him his assignment. "Listen up," God said. "I'm sending you to your people, Israel. They hard-headed, stubborn, and rebellious. They've been ignoring me for generations. But you gon' tell them exactly what I say, whether they listen or not. At the end of the day, they gon' know a prophet was in their presence." God could already tell Ezekiel might feel intimidated, so he shut that down quick. Don't be scared of them. Don't let their words or looks shake you. Yeah, they tough, but I got you covered. You speak what I tell you, no holding back. Then God gave Ezekiel a scroll, and it was covered front to back with words of mourning, sorrow, and warning. He told Ezekiel, "Eat this scroll," meaning fully take in the message before speaking it to the people. Moral of the story: when God calls you, he equips you, even when the assignment is tough. People might reject the truth, but your job isn't to make them comfortable. It's to stay obedient and speak what God gives you. Don't be afraid, because if God sends you, he got you. Ezekiel 3. God told Ezekiel, "Eat this scroll. Let it fill you up, then go speak to the people." Ezekiel did as he was told, and surprisingly, the scroll tasted sweet like honey. Then God said, "Now go to Israel and tell them exactly what I said. But don't get it twisted. They ain't gonna listen. They don't even listen to me, so they definitely not about to hear you out. If I sent you to a foreign nation, they'd probably listen. But your own people? Too stubborn, too hard-headed." Then God said, "But don't worry, I'ma make you just as tough as them. Their hearts are stone, but I'ma make you even stronger. Forehead like flint, unshakable. Don't be scared of their faces or their attitude. Just do what I say." The Spirit lifted Ezekiel up, and he heard loud, thunderous voices saying, "Blessed is God's glory in this place." Then the Spirit took him away, and he felt overwhelmed, stressed but also filled with God's power. He sat in silence for 7 days, just letting everything sink in. After that, God spoke again. "You're a watchman now. When I give you a warning, you better deliver it. If I tell you somebody's about to die in their sin and you don't warn them, their blood is on your hands. But if you warn them and they still don't listen, that's on them. Same goes for the righteous. If they start slipping and you don't check them, they'll fall and it'll be on you. But if you warn them and they listen, you've done your part. Then God told Ezekiel to go out to a valley, where he showed up again in his full glory. Ezekiel hit the ground in awe, and the Spirit lifted him up once more. God told him, "Go home, stay inside. You won't be able to speak unless I allow it. When I do, you'll only say what I tell you, nothing more, nothing less." Moral of the story: when God gives you a message, you gotta deliver it, no matter how people react. If you stay silent when he tells you to speak, you're responsible for what happens. But if you do your part, you're in the clear. Obedience to God comes before people's opinions. Stay solid, stay bold. Ezekiel 4. God gave Ezekiel some wild instructions to act out a message for Israel. He said, "Take a brick, draw Jerusalem on it, and set up a battle scene against it, like a little war model. This is how I must show the people that their city is about to be under siege." Then God told him, "Now, lay on your left side for 390 days. That's 1 day for each year Israel has been wilding against me. After that, turn over and lay on your right side for 40 more days, 1 for each year of Judah's sin. This is you carrying the weight of their mess." To make things even harder, God told Ezekiel he could only eat a little bread each day, baked over cow dung, symbolizing the struggle and lack of food the people would go through when the city got taken over. Ezekiel was shook at first, but God showed some mercy and let him use cow dung instead of human waste. God ended by saying, "This is how it's gonna be for Israel. They'll be scattered, starving, and desperate because they didn't listen. They'll try to survive, but they won't have enough. Fear and destruction are coming, and it's too late to take it back." Moral of the story: sometimes God will have you do things that don't make sense to others, but it's all part of his bigger plan. When people refuse to listen to him, consequences will come. Disobedience leads to struggle, but God always gives warnings first. You just got to pay attention. Ezekiel 5. God told Ezekiel, "Grab a sword and use it like a razor. Shave your head and beard. Then take the hair and divide it into 3 piles. Burn 1/3 in the middle of the city, chop another third up with a sword, and scatter the last third to the wind. This is how I'm showing what's about to happen to Jerusalem." Then God broke it down. 1/3 of the people will die from disease and famine when the siege hits. Another third will be killed by enemy swords. The last third will be scattered across the world. But even they won't escape judgment. God kept going. "Y'all were supposed to be different, set apart, but instead you acted worse than the nations around you. You disrespected me, broke my laws, and did whatever you wanted. So now, I'm done holding back. My anger is real, and it's coming down heavy. People will see what happens and know I don't play about righteousness." God promised that after the destruction, a small group would survive, but they'd carry the weight of guilt and regret for everything that went down. When the nations see how I deal with my own people, they'll know I am the Lord, and I don't tolerate wickedness. Moral of the story: God's patience is deep, but it's not unlimited. When people refuse to change, consequences come. If you take his grace for granted and keep choosing rebellion, he will step in and correct it. But even in judgment, he leaves a remnant, a chance to rebuild and get it right. Ezekiel 6. God told Ezekiel, "Turn toward the mountains of Israel and prophesy against them. Tell them that because of all the idol worship and wickedness, destruction is coming. The altars y'all built for false gods, gone. The incense you burned to them, worthless. Your cities, left in ruins. Bodies will be scattered around the idols you worshipped, and then you'll finally realize I'm the Lord. God made it clear. Some of y'all will survive, but you'll be scattered among the nations. And when you're out there, you'll remember what you did, how you turned your back on me, how you chased after false gods. You'll feel the weight of your sins and hate what you've done. Then he said, I'm bringing this judgment because y'all were stubborn. But even in my anger, I won't wipe everyone out. Some will live to tell the story, and when it's all said and done, you'll know I wasn't playing. My word stands. Ezekiel fell down and cried out, but God told him, clap your hands, stomp your feet, and prophesy against this mess. The people will die by famine, disease, and war. Those who survive will be scattered, and when they see what happens, they'll finally understand that I am the Lord. Moral of the story: God ain't gonna let people disrespect him forever. If you put other things before him, he'll remove them, even if it means letting you hit rock bottom. But he doesn't destroy just to destroy. He does it to wake people up so they can turn back to him before it's too late. Ezekiel 7. God told Ezekiel, it's over. The end is here for Israel. No more warnings, no more delays. Disaster is coming and there's no stopping it. Y'all been living foul for too long and now you gotta face the consequences. I'm not sparing anybody, and when it all goes down, you'll know I am the Lord. God kept going. Your time is up. The city is full of violence. The land is full of pride. And I'm about to shut it all down. No more celebrating. No more business as usual. Destruction is knocking at the door. Then he said, people will be throwing their silver and gold in the streets, but it won't save them. Money won't matter when I bring judgment. They use their wealth for sin instead of righteousness, so now their riches will be worthless. Chaos is coming. War outside, disease and famine inside. The strong will fall, the weak will suffer, and fear will take over the land. God warned, the enemy is coming, and they won't show mercy. The people will try to run, but there will be nowhere to hide. Priests, leaders, kings, everybody will be in shock, hands weak, knees shaking. They'll realize too late that they should have listened. Moral of the story: when God says enough is enough, there's no escaping his judgment. Money, status, and power won't save you if you've been ignoring him. If you live recklessly, destruction is inevitable. But if you stay right with God, you won't have to fear the storm. Ezekiel 8. One day, while Ezekiel was sitting in his house with the elders of Judah, the power of God hit him. In a vision, he saw something like a glowing figure. Fire from the waist down, shining like metal from the waist up. This figure reached out, grabbed Ezekiel by his hair, and the Spirit lifted him up between heaven and earth, taking him straight to Jerusalem. God placed him at the north gate of the temple, and what Ezekiel saw had him shook. Right there in God's house, the people were deep in idol worship, doing things that made God furious. God said, You see this mess? This is why I'm about to bring judgment. Then God told him, but wait, it gets worse. Ezekiel was led to a secret room inside the temple. On the walls were carvings of every kind of unclean animal and idol, and 70 elders of Israel were in there burning incense to them. God said, they think I don't see them, they say. The Lord has abandoned us, but I see everything. Then God took Ezekiel to another part of the temple. There, women were weeping for Tammuz, a false god. You see this? God said, but there's more. Finally, God brought him to the inner court of the temple. 25 men stood there, backs turned to God's sanctuary, bowing to the sun in the east, worshiping creation instead of the Creator. God was done. Do you see how deep this rebellion runs? They're disrespecting me in my own house. I will not hold back. Judgment is coming, and they will feel my wrath. Moral of the story: God sees everything, even the sins people try to hide. When you turn your back on him, Don't be surprised when he stops protecting you. Playing with idolatry, whether it's false gods, money, power, or anything else, leads to destruction. You can fool people, but you can't fool God. Ezekiel 9. Then God called out in a loud voice, and 6 men appeared, each holding a deadly weapon. Along with them was a man dressed in linen, carrying a writing kit. They all stood at the entrance of the temple, and God's glory moved from its usual place to the threshold of the temple, ready to execute judgment. God told the man in linen, "Go through the city and put a mark on the foreheads of everyone who still mourns over the sin in this land, those who haven't given in to the wickedness." Then he turned to the other men and said, "Follow behind him and strike down everybody without the mark. Show no mercy. Old, young men, women, children, wipe them out. Start at my temple." So the judgment began right there in God's house, with the elders who had been leading the people into sin. As they carried out the destruction, Ezekiel fell face down, crying out, "Lord, are you really going to destroy everyone left in Israel?" God responded, "Their sin is out of control. Violence fills the land, and they act like I don't see it. They think I've abandoned them, so they do whatever they want. But now, my judgment is here. I will not hold back." Then the man in linen came back and said, "It's done. I did everything you commanded." Moral of the story: God's judgment starts with his own people. If you claim to follow him but live in rebellion, don't expect a pass. But for those who stay faithful and grieve over sin instead of indulging in it, God knows who you are, and he will protect you. Ezekiel 10. Ezekiel looked up and saw something wild. Above the cherubim was a throne that looked like sapphire. Then God spoke to the man in linen and said, "Step into the fire between the wheels. Grab burning coals and scatter them over the city." Ezekiel watched as the man obeyed, while the cherubim stood there, shining with the glory of God. The cherubim had 4 faces, one like a cherub, one like a man, one like a lion, and one like an eagle. Their bodies, backs, hands, and wings were covered in eyes, and each had a wheel beside it, moving in sync with them. The Spirit of God was in the wheels, guiding every move. Then Ezekiel saw something heartbreaking. The glory of God, which had always rested in the temple, started to leave. It moved to the temple's entrance, filling the place with brightness, but then it lifted above the cherubim. As the cherubim spread their wings and rose into the air, the wheels followed, and they all left the temple, stopping at the east gate. God's presence was leaving the place that had once been his home. Ezekiel knew this was a major moment. God's patience had run out, and his glory was departing because of Israel's rebellion. Morale of the story: when people refuse to honor God, he won't stay where he's not welcome. His presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. If you keep turning away from him, eventually, he will let you have life without him, and that's a scary place to be. Ezekiel 11. Then the Spirit lifted Ezekiel and took him to the east gate of the temple, where 25 leaders of the people were gathered. Among them were 2 corrupt men, Jaazaniah and Pelatiah, who were leading the city deeper into sin. God told Ezekiel, "These men think they're safe, telling people everything is fine when destruction is right at the door. They say, 'This city is the pot, and we are the meat,' acting like they're secure, but they don't realize judgment is coming." So Ezekiel prophesied, saying, "Y'all have been running things with violence, filling the streets with innocent blood. You think you're untouchable, but the real enemy is about to break in and take over. You won't die in this city like you expect. You'll be dragged out and judged. Then you'll know that I am the Lord." While Ezekiel was speaking, Pelatiah suddenly dropped dead. Seeing this, Ezekiel fell to the ground, crying out, "Lord, are you going to destroy everyone left in Israel?" But God gave him hope. Even though I scattered my people among the nations, I haven't abandoned them. Wherever they are, I will be their sanctuary. And one day I'll bring them back. I will remove their hardened hearts and give them new ones, hearts that follow my ways. Then they will be my people, and I will be their God. But those who stay in rebellion, chasing after idols, they'll face the consequences. Then Ezekiel watched as the glory of God fully departed from Jerusalem, moving to the Mount of Olives. The vision ended, and Ezekiel found himself back in Babylon, where he told the exiles everything he had seen. Moral of the story: God sees corrupt leaders and won't let their lies and false security last forever. Judgment comes for the wicked, but even in discipline, God doesn't abandon his people. If you turn back to him, he will restore you, give you a new heart, and bring you back to where you belong. Ezekiel 12. God told Ezekiel, "You're living among a hard-headed, rebellious people. They see, but they act blind. They hear, but they act deaf. So now you're going to show them what's about to happen." God gave Ezekiel some instructions. Pack your bags like you're going into exile and leave in broad daylight so everybody sees. Then, in the evening, dig a hole in the wall of your house and crawl through it with your bags on your shoulders. Cover your face so you can't see the land, because that's exactly what's about to happen to them. Ezekiel did everything as commanded, and the next morning, God spoke again. "These folks keep asking what you're doing. Tell them this is a sign of what's coming for their king and all the people in Jerusalem. The king will try to escape under cover of night, but he won't make it. He'll be captured, blinded, and taken to Babylon, where he'll die. The rest will be scattered in every direction, and only a few will survive to tell the story." Then God told Ezekiel, "Now, eat your food in fear and drink your water trembling, because soon that's how life will be in Jerusalem. Food will run out, water will dry up, and the people will waste away in their sin." The people kept saying, "These prophecies are for the distant future." But God shut that down quick. "Nah, this is happening now. My words won't be delayed any longer. What I say will happen." Morale of the story: God warns before he acts, but if people ignore him, judgment still comes. Don't assume you have unlimited time to get right. When God says the time is up, it's up. Listen while you still can. Ezekiel 13. God told Ezekiel, "Prophesy against these fake prophets out here lying in my name. They making up visions, telling people what they want to hear instead of what I really said. They acting like they've been sent by me, but I didn't send them. They leading my people straight into destruction." God kept going. "These so-called prophets are like weak walls covered in cheap paint. They might look good for a minute, but when the storm comes, that wall is coming down. And when it does, everybody will see that their words were worthless. I'm bringing judgment on them, and they won't be counted among my people." Then God told Ezekiel to speak against the women who were acting as false prophetesses, trapping people with superstition and lies. "Y'all out here deceiving my people for money, telling them they're safe when they're not. You let the guilty live and condemn the innocent. I'm tearing down everything you built. I will free my people from your lies, and then you'll know I am the Lord." Moral of the story: not everyone who claims to speak for God is telling the truth. False teachers give people false hope, but when life hits, their words won't hold up. If you're listening to lies instead of seeking God for yourself, you might get caught slipping when judgment comes. Ezekiel 14. Some of the elders of Israel came to Ezekiel, trying to act like they wanted a word from God, but God saw right through them. He told Ezekiel, "These men have set up idols in their hearts. They pretend they want my guidance, but they really chasing after other gods. So here's my answer. If anyone comes to me while still holding on to idols, I'm going to deal with them myself. I will reach into their hearts and expose their sin, so they know I am the Lord." Then God made it clear. "Tell Israel to repent. Get rid of these idols and turn back to me, because if they don't, and they still come looking for a word, I won't answer them the way they expect. I'll answer with judgment." God also warned about the false prophets who were out here lying in his name. "If a prophet dares to speak falsely, I'll handle him. But if the people follow his lies, they'll face judgment too." Everybody's accountable for their own actions. No more excuses. Then God hit them with a serious reality check. "If I send judgment on a land, famine, wild animals, war, or disease, even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, they could only save themselves. Their righteousness wouldn't be enough to cover anyone else. That's how bad things are about to get for Jerusalem. But even after all this, I will leave a remnant. Some will survive, and when they tell their story, people will understand why my judgment had to happen." Moral of the story: God sees through fake devotion. You can't serve idols in your heart and still expect his blessings. Judgment is personal. Other people's righteousness won't save you. But even in judgment, God always leaves a remnant, giving hope for restoration. Ezekiel 15. God gave Ezekiel a simple but powerful analogy. "Son of man, what's the use of a vine from the forest? Can you make furniture out of it? Can you use it to build something strong? Nah, it's only good for firewood, and once it's burned up, it's even more useless." Then God broke it down. "That's how Israel is to me right now. They were supposed to be fruitful, but instead they worthless like a dead vine. So now, I'm throwing them into the fire. Judgment is coming, and when it hits, they'll know I am the Lord. They turned their backs on me, so I'm turning my face from them. The land will be ruined, and they'll have no one to blame but themselves." Morale of the story: God created you to be fruitful, to live with purpose. If you keep rejecting him, you risk becoming useless like a burned-up vine. But if you stay connected to him, you'll produce something valuable. Ezekiel 16. God told Ezekiel, "Let Israel know how deep their betrayal runs." He broke it down with a powerful story. "Jerusalem, you were born like an abandoned baby, unwanted, left in the streets, covered in blood. Nobody cared, nobody helped you. But I saw you and I said, 'Live.' I raised you, took care of you, and watched you grow into something beautiful. When you were old enough, I covered you, made you mine, and blessed you with riches, fine clothes, and royalty. I made you shine, and the whole world knew it was because of me. But what did you do? You got proud, turned your back on me, and acted like you made yourself great. You used the gifts I gave you to chase after other lovers, sleeping with idols, making sacrifices, and worshiping false gods. You even took the gold and jewelry I gave you and melted them down to make idols. You sacrificed your own children to these fake gods. Wasn't my love enough for you?" God kept going. "You weren't even like a normal prostitute. At least they get paid. But you paid others to use you. You gave away everything I blessed you with just to chase after nations who don't even care about you. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon. You ran to all of them, and they all left you broken. So now, judgment is coming. The same nations you ran after will be the ones to turn on you. I'm letting them tear down everything you built, expose you, and take what you thought was yours. Since you treated our covenant like nothing, I'm going to let you feel what it's like to be left with nothing." But then, after all that wrath, God gave a glimpse of mercy. "Even after all this, I won't completely destroy you. I will remember the covenant I made with you, and one day I'll restore you, not because you deserve it, but because of my grace. You'll finally understand how deep my love is. and instead of running your mouth, you'll be humbled and grateful. Moral of the story: God's blessings come with responsibility. If you take His love for granted and chase after things that don't honor Him, you set yourself up for downfall. But even in judgment, His mercy is real. He doesn't give up on His people, even when they fail. Ezekiel 17. God gave Ezekiel a parable about 2 eagles and a vine to explain what was happening with Israel. He said, "A mighty eagle came to Lebanon and broke off the top of a cedar tree. He carried it to a distant land and planted it there. Then he took a seed and planted it in good soil near a stream, and it grew into a low-spreading vine, reaching toward the eagle. But then another great eagle came along, and that same vine stretched its roots toward him instead, trying to grow under his shade instead of staying where it was planted. But because of that, it won't last. The first eagle will pull it up, and it'll wither and die." Then God explained the meaning. The first eagle is Babylon. The king of Babylon came and took Judah's king and nobles into exile. He made a deal with a new king in Judah, giving him a chance to stay in the land as long as he remained loyal. But instead of honoring the agreement, this king, Zedekiah, ran to Egypt for help. Now, he's done. Egypt won't save him. Babylon will crush him, and he'll die in exile. God made it clear. I gave Judah a chance to survive, even under Babylon, but they broke the covenant. They disrespected me, not just Babylon. And when you break a covenant, judgment follows. Zedekiah thought he could play both sides, but now he'll lose everything. But then, God gave a promise. One day, I will take a small branch from the highest part of a cedar tree and plant it on a high mountain. It will grow into a mighty tree, and birds from everywhere will rest in its shade. All will know that I, the Lord, bring down the proud and lift up the humble. I make trees flourish, and I make them wither. When I say it, it happens. Moral of the story: trusting in human alliances instead of God will always fail. When you break a covenant, you break trust, and consequences follow. But even in judgment, God has a bigger plan. He will raise up something new, something greater, and His purpose will stand no matter what. Ezekiel 18. God told Ezekiel, "Y'all keep saying this proverb. The parents ate sour grapes, and now the children's teeth are messed up. But I don't want to hear that anymore. Stop blaming your ancestors. Every person is responsible for their own actions. The one who sins is the one who will face judgment." God broke it down. If a man does what is right, lives righteously, stays away from idols, doesn't oppress people, helps the poor, keeps my commandments, he will live. But if he has a son who does the opposite, commits violence, worships idols, mistreats others, that son will face judgment for his own sins. Then, if that wicked man has a son who sees his father's mistakes and chooses to live righteously, that son won't be punished for his father's sins. Each person stands on their own choices. Then God addressed the people's complaints. Y'all say my ways aren't fair, but let's be real. Who's really being unfair? If a wicked person turns from their sin and does what's right, they will live. I don't take pleasure in anyone dying. I want people to turn and live. But if a righteous person turns to wickedness, all their past righteousness won't save them. They will face judgment for their sins. God ended with a call to action. So turn away from your wickedness. Get a new heart and a new spirit. Why choose death when you could choose life? I don't want to destroy anyone. I want y'all to live. So repent and come back to me. Moral of the story: God doesn't hold you back because of your family's mistakes, and He won't give you a free pass just because of your past righteousness. Everybody is accountable for their own choices. If you're living wrong, you can still turn back and be saved. But if you think you can do good for a while and then go back to wickedness without consequences, you're fooling yourself. God wants life for you, but the choice is yours. Ezekiel 19. God told Ezekiel to sing a funeral song for Israel's leaders. He started with this: Your mother was like a lioness, raising strong cubs. One of her cubs grew into a fierce young lion, learning to hunt and rule. But the nations heard about him, trapped him, and dragged him off to Egypt. Then she raised another cub, and he became even more ruthless, tearing prey apart, spreading fear and making his presence known. But the nations came together against him too. They caught him in a net, put him in a cage, and sent him to Babylon, where he would never roar in his homeland again. Then Ezekiel switched the imagery. Your mother was once like a strong vine, planted by the water, full of life. Her branches were powerful like a ruler's scepter. She was strong, thriving, but then she was uprooted in fury, thrown to the ground, and left in the wilderness to wither. Now she's dry, fruitless, and there's nothing left of her power. This is a funeral song, God said, because this is the end for your leaders. Moral of the story: Israel had strength, power, and favor, but they misused it, and now they're facing the consequences. No matter how high you rise, if you turn away from God, destruction will follow. What was once strong can be brought low in an instant. Stay humble, stay obedient, and don't take God's blessings for granted. Ezekiel 20. Some of Israel's elders came to Ezekiel trying to get a word from God. But God wasn't having it. He said, "Why should I answer y'all when you stay living in rebellion?" Let's take a trip down memory lane so you understand why judgment is coming. God started from the beginning. When I chose Israel, I made myself known to them in Egypt. I told them, "Leave behind the idols of Egypt and follow me." But they refused. Even then, I could have destroyed them, but for the sake of my name, I brought them out of Egypt with power. Then in the wilderness, I gave them my laws, which were meant to bring life. I told them to honor my Sabbaths as a sign of our covenant. But what did they do? Rebelled again. They ignored my commands, disrespected the Sabbaths, and chased after idols. Still, I showed mercy. I warned them, but I didn't wipe them out. But their children, they followed in their parents' footsteps. I told them, don't make the same mistakes, don't worship idols, don't break my commands. But they didn't listen either. So I let them go their own way, knowing their choices would lead to suffering. God kept going. When they got to the promised land, instead of honoring me, they brought their idol worship with them. They sacrificed their children to false gods, thinking that was what I wanted. So now, judgment is here. But even in judgment, God left the door open. One day, I will bring you back, not because you deserve it, but for the sake of my name. I will purify you, separate you from your rebellion, and you will finally understand who I am. No more idols, no more disobedience, just me, your God. Then God told Ezekiel to prophesy about the coming fire. A blazing fire is coming to consume everything. North to south, all will feel it. And when people ask, "Is this just another parable?" tell them, "No, this is real and it's coming." Moral of the story: God is patient, but patience isn't the same as approval. He's given warning after warning, but if you keep rejecting him, judgment will come. Still, he never gives up on his people. He disciplines to correct, not to destroy. The question is, will you learn before it's too late? Ezekiel 21. God told Ezekiel, "Son of man, turn toward Jerusalem and prophesy against the land of Israel. Tell them this: the sword of the Lord is coming. Judgment is here, and I won't hold back." God continued, "My sword is sharp and ready to strike down both the righteous and the wicked. Disaster is coming from every direction, and no one will escape it. People will be terrified, knees shaking, because when I unleash my wrath, there's no stopping it." Then God told Ezekiel, "Cry out, mourn, and wail. Let them see how serious this is. The sword is coming for everyone, leaders, people, and even those who thought they were safe. The sword will be polished, flashing like lightning, ready to strike." Then God gave Ezekiel another message. "Mark 2 roads for the king of Babylon, one leading to Jerusalem and one to Ammon. The king will use divination, shaking arrows, consulting idols, and checking the liver of a sacrifice to decide which way to go. And guess what? Jerusalem is the target. He'll storm the city, break down the gates, and capture its people. But the Israelites will say, 'Nah, we made a treaty. We should be safe.' Too bad. Their sins have caught up with them, and Babylon is my instrument of judgment." But then God spoke directly to Israel's wicked ruler. "You think your crown makes you untouchable. It's coming off. The proud will be humbled, and the lowly will be lifted up. Nothing will be right until the true king comes, the one I have chosen." Finally, God addressed the Ammonites, who thought they were in the clear. "Y'all laughed while Israel was getting destroyed, but don't get too comfortable. My sword is coming for you too. You'll be wiped out, never to rise again." Morale of the story: when God's judgment comes, there's no escape. Power, alliances, and status won't save you if you've been living in rebellion. But even in destruction, God is setting things up for the true king, Jesus, the only one who can make things right. Ezekiel 22. God told Ezekiel, "Son of man, call out Jerusalem for all the bloodshed and sin in the city. They act like I don't see them, but their hands are covered in blood, and their idols are everywhere. They've disrespected my laws, oppressed the poor, mistreated foreigners, and ignored justice. Now, their time is up." God continued, "The leaders are corrupt, killing and stealing without a second thought. The priests twist my laws, acting like sin isn't a big deal. The officials destroy people for their own gain. The prophets cover up the mess with lies, telling people everything's fine when destruction is around the corner. And the people, they're just as bad, cheating, robbing, and turning their backs on the helpless. Nobody stands for righteousness." Then God said, "I look for just one person to stand in the gap, someone who would intercede for the land so I wouldn't have to destroy it. But I found no one. So now, my wrath is coming. I will pour out my judgment, let them feel the weight of their sins, and scatter them among the nations. Then they'll know that I am the Lord." Moral of the story: when corruption runs deep and nobody is willing to stand for righteousness, judgment is inevitable. God gives people a chance to turn back, but if no one steps up, consequences follow. The question is, will you be the one who stands in the gap, or will you go down with the rest? Ezekiel 23. God gave Ezekiel a story about two sisters, Oholah and Oholibah, representing Samaria, Israel, and Jerusalem, Judah. He said, "These two sisters were mine, but they played the harlot with other nations instead of staying faithful to me." Oholah, Samaria, started first. She gave herself to Assyria, chasing after their ways and trusting in them instead of me. So I let her have what she wanted, and Assyria ended up turning on her. They stripped her, took her children, and left her in ruins. But did Oholibah, Jerusalem, learn from her sister's downfall? Nope. She was even worse. She chased after Assyria too, then lusted after Babylon, wanting to be like them, following their customs, their idols, and their wickedness. She gave herself to these nations, trusting in them instead of trusting me. So now, just like her sister, she's about to face destruction. God then said, "These nations you ran after, they're the same ones who will bring you down. Babylon is coming to take everything, your wealth, your children, your land. You wanted their attention? Now you got it, but it won't be the way you expected." God continued, "Since you forgot about me and threw me aside like I didn't raise you, I'm done holding back. You will drink from the same bitter cup as your sister. You will be mocked, stripped, and humiliated, and you'll finally see what happens when you turn your back on the Lord." Ezekiel then delivered the final word. God has spoken. Judgment is set. You played yourself chasing after these nations, thinking they would protect you. But now, the same ones you trusted will be the ones to destroy you. Moral of the story: trusting in the world instead of God will always backfire. What looks appealing at first can end up being the very thing that destroys you. If you keep chasing after things that pull you away from God, don't be surprised when they leave you broken. Ezekiel 24th. On the very day Babylon started attacking Jerusalem, God told Ezekiel, "Son of man, give Israel this message. Put a pot on the fire and fill it with water. Throw in the best cuts of meat, the choice bones, the finest pieces. Let it boil until everything is cooked." Then God explained the meaning. "This pot is Jerusalem, and the people inside are like the meat. The city is full of bloodshed, corruption, and sin. And now, just like that pot, it's about to be set on fire. The filth of this city has been building up for too long, and I'm done holding back. The fire of my judgment will burn until everything is purified. No more excuses, no more delays. This time, you will feel the heat." Then, God gave Ezekiel some heartbreaking news. "Son of man, I'm about to take away the love of your life, your wife. But listen, when it happens, don't mourn, don't cry, don't show any grief. Keep going like nothing happened." That evening, Ezekiel's wife died. The next morning, he did exactly as God commanded. The people were confused and asked, "Why aren't you mourning?" Ezekiel told them, "God is showing you something. Just like I lost my wife, y'all are about to lose Jerusalem, your temple, your home, your children. And when it happens, you won't even have time to mourn. The destruction will be so overwhelming that you'll be left in shock, unable to cry. You'll finally realize the weight of what you've done." Morale of the story: when God's judgment comes, it's final. He gives warnings, but if people refuse to listen, they will feel the full weight of their choices. Don't wait until it's too late. Turn back before the fire comes. Ezekiel 25. God gave Ezekiel a message for the nations surrounding Israel, because while Israel was being judged, these nations thought they could sit back and laugh. But God had something for them too. Ammon. God said, "Y'all was celebrating when my temple was destroyed, clapping and cheering when Israel fell. You thought it was funny? Now, I'm sending Babylon your way. Your land will be overrun, your cities destroyed, and you'll be wiped out. Then you'll know I am the Lord." Moab. God said, "You disrespected my people, saying Israel ain't special, they just like everybody else. So now, I'm letting Babylon take you out too. Your land will be handed over to others, and your strength will be gone. Then you'll know I am the Lord." Edom. God said, "When Israel was down, you took advantage and attacked them instead of helping. You thought you could get away with it? Now, I'm bringing my wrath against you. Your land will be empty, and your people will fall. Then you'll know I am the Lord." Philistines. God said, "Y'all been holding grudges against Israel for generations, always coming back for revenge. But now, I'm wiping you out completely. No more attacks, no more Philistine nation. Then you'll know I am the Lord. Moral of the story: don't celebrate when others fall, because you might be next. God sees everything, including how people treat his chosen ones. If you mock, attack, or take advantage of someone in their downfall, God will handle you in due time. Stay humble. Ezekiel 26. God gave Ezekiel a message for Tyre, a powerful coastal city that was getting cocky after Jerusalem fell. Tyre thought, "Look at Israel, down bad. Now I can take all their business and get richer." But God wasn't having it. He said, "Because you laughed at my people's downfall, I'm bringing Babylon to your doorstep. King Nebuchadnezzar and his army will roll through, destroy your walls, tear down your towers, and leave you nothing but rubble. Your fancy city will be wiped clean like a rock, only good for drying fishing nets." God kept going. Your wealth, your ships, your trade, gone. The nations that did business with you will be in shock when they see you fall. They'll cry out, "How could the mighty Tyre be destroyed like this?" But it's happening. The waves will crash over you and you'll never rise again. God made it clear. You thought you were untouchable, but now I'm making an example out of you. When I bring judgment, no nation, no matter how powerful, can stand against me. Morale of the story: pride and greed will set you up for destruction. If you celebrate someone else's downfall, you might be next. Nothing in this world, money, power, or influence can protect you from God's judgment. Stay humble, because he's the one who raises up and tears down. Ezekiel 27. God told Ezekiel to deliver a funeral song for Tyre, the wealthy trading city that thought it was untouchable. Ezekiel described Tyre like a beautifully crafted ship. You were built strong, made from the finest wood with sails of rich fabric and oars of bronze. The best craftsmen worked on you, and nations from all over came to do business with you. You were the marketplace of the world, trading silver, spices, jewels, and every luxury imaginable. He kept going. You had warriors from every nation defending you. Your merchants came from all over, Greece, Egypt, Arabia, and beyond. Everybody wanted a piece of what you had. Your wealth made you proud, and you thought you could never fall. Then came the warning. But now, your mighty ship is sinking, a great storm is coming, and all your wealth, your people, and your traders will be swallowed by the sea. The nations that once did business with you will be shocked, mourning your downfall. They'll say, "Who else was like Tyre? Now you're nothing but wreckage at the bottom of the sea." Moral of the story: wealth and success can make people think they're invincible, but nothing lasts forever. If you put your trust in money and power instead of God, your foundation is weak. When the storm comes, all that success won't save you. Stay humble, because pride will sink you. Ezekiel 28. God gave Ezekiel a message for the king of Tyre, who thought he was more than just a man. God said, "You think you're a god. You sit in your palace like you run the universe, but you're just a man, not divine. Yeah, you're wise in business. You stacked your gold and silver, and you made yourself rich. But because of your pride, I'm sending nations against you. They'll draw their swords, take everything you built, and leave you dead like any other human. Let's see if you still call yourself a god when you're bleeding out." Then God had another message. This one wasn't just for the human king, but for the spiritual power behind him. He spoke about a being that was once in Eden, perfect and full of wisdom, covered in jewels, anointed by God, and placed on the holy mountain. But pride got the best of him. He got arrogant because of his beauty and thought he could rise above God. So God cast him down, exposing him before the nations and bringing him to ruin. Then God turned his attention to Sidon, another city near Tyre. Judgment is coming for you too. Disease, war, and destruction will hit your streets until you finally know that I am the Lord. But even in all this judgment, God left a promise for Israel. When I'm done dealing with these wicked nations, I will gather my people back. They'll live in their land without fear, free from their enemies, and they will know that I am their God. Moral of the story: pride is the quickest way to fall. Whether you're a king, a businessman, or a spiritual being like Satan, if you exalt yourself above God, you will be brought low. No amount of wisdom, wealth, or power can save you from his judgment. But for those who stay faithful, God has restoration waiting. Ezekiel 29. God gave Ezekiel a message for Pharaoh and Egypt, calling Pharaoh out for thinking he was untouchable. God said, "Pharaoh, you out here thinking you own the Nile, saying, 'I made this river, it's mine,' but you ain't nothing but a big crocodile in my waters, and I'm about to drag you out. I'm hooking your jaws, pulling you and your little fish, your people, out of the river, and tossing y'all into the wilderness to rot. Ain't nobody coming to help you." God kept going. Egypt has been a weak crutch for Israel. Y'all acted like you had their back, but when they leaned on you, you broke and left them stranded. So now, I'm coming for you. Babylon is going to roll through, wreck your cities, and leave your land empty for 40 years. Egypt will be humbled, scattered, and forgotten. But after those 40 years, God promised to bring Egypt back, not to its former glory, but as a small, humbled nation, no longer a superpower, no longer a false hope for anyone looking for protection. Then God spoke about Babylon, saying, "Nebuchadnezzar put in work conquering Tyre, but it was a tough battle, and his soldiers didn't get much out of it. So, I'm giving him Egypt as his reward. His troops will plunder it for everything it's got." Finally, God ended with a promise. "When I bring Egypt low, I'll also start restoring Israel. They'll finally see that I am the Lord." Moral of the story: pride and false security will get you humbled real quick. Egypt thought they were unstoppable, but God showed them who really runs things. If you put your trust in human power instead of God, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Only God's promises stand the test of time. Ezekiel 30. God told Ezekiel, "Son of man, prophesy. The day of destruction is near. Egypt's time is up, and so is everyone who stands with them." God warned that a storm of war was coming to crush Egypt and all its allies: Cush, Put, Lydia, Arabia, and Libya. "When my sword comes down, the whole land will shake. The pride of Egypt will be broken. Their cities will burn, and their people will fall. The enemy is coming, and there's no escape." God made it clear. Nebuchadnezzar and his army will wipe Egypt out. I'm handing the land over to Babylon, and they will come through like a flood, wiping out cities, idols, and false hopes. Then he spoke about Pharaoh, saying, "His arms are broken, he's weak, and he won't recover. But Babylon's king, I'm making his arms strong to finish the job." God ended with this: "When Egypt falls, the world will know that I am the Lord." Moral of the story: when you put your trust in power, wealth, or alliances instead of God, you're setting yourself up for destruction. Egypt thought they were secure, but their strength meant nothing when God's judgment came. True security is only found in Him. Ezekiel 31. God told Ezekiel, "Give Pharaoh this message. You think you're great? Let's talk about Assyria." Then God painted a picture. Assyria was like a mighty cedar tree in Lebanon, tall, strong, and beautiful. Its branches stretched far, giving shade to nations. Its roots ran deep, drawing from the best waters, and every nation admired it. But Assyria got proud. It thought it was untouchable. So I cut it down. Foreign nations came, chopped it to pieces, and left it lying in ruins. The birds sat on its broken branches, and the animals walked over its fallen trunk. No other trees, nations would ever grow that tall again. Then God turned to Pharaoh. Egypt, you think you're different? You're headed for the same fate. Just like Assyria, you'll be brought down to the pit, to the land of the dead. You'll lie there with all the other fallen nations, wondering how you got there. Moral of the story: pride goes before destruction. Egypt thought it was too big to fall, just like Assyria did. But no one is above God's judgment. Power without humility leads to downfall. Stay grounded, because the higher you lift yourself up, the harder you fall. Ezekiel 32. God gave Ezekiel a funeral song for Pharaoh and Egypt. He said, "Pharaoh, you think you're a mighty lion, but you're really just a sea monster stirring up trouble. I'm about to catch you in my net, drag you to shore, and leave you out to dry. The nations will see your downfall, and they will tremble." God continued, "When I take you down, the whole world will feel it. I'll cover the skies, block out the stars, and darken the land. The nations will shake when they hear about your fall. Kings will be afraid, knowing they could be next." Then God spoke about how Egypt would be destroyed. "The sword of Babylon is coming, and it won't leave anything behind. Your cities will be wiped out, your land left empty. Your pride, your power, it's all coming to nothing." Finally, God described Egypt's final destination, the land of the dead where fallen nations lay in shame. "You'll join Assyria, Elam, Meshech, Tubal, and all the other once mighty nations that thought they were invincible. They were feared in life, but now they're just another group of fallen warriors lying in the grave. You will be placed among them, Pharaoh, you and your people, broken and forgotten." Moral of the story: no empire, no leader, no kingdom is too big to fall. Egypt thought they were untouchable, but God showed them that power without righteousness is a setup for destruction. The real question is, are you building something that will stand or something that will crumble? Ezekiel 33. God told Ezekiel, "Son of man, you're a watchman for Israel. When danger comes, a watchman blows the trumpet to warn the people. If they listen, they can save themselves. But if they ignore the warning, their downfall is on them. However, if the watchman sees danger and stays silent, then the people will fall, and their blood will be on him." Then God made it personal. "Ezekiel, I've made you a watchman. When I give you a message, you better speak it. If you don't warn them, their fate is on your hands. But if you warn them and they still refuse to listen, that's on them." Next, God gave a message for the rebellious Israelites. "Y'all keep saying, our sins are too heavy, we're doomed. But I don't take pleasure in destroying the wicked. I want them to turn back and live. So repent, stop playing with sin and choose life." Then God spoke about how judgment works. If a righteous person turns wicked, their past good deeds won't save them. And if a wicked person repents, their past sins won't condemn them. It's about where you stand now. So, don't get comfortable in past righteousness, and don't think past sin means you're beyond saving. Later, news came that Jerusalem had fallen, just like God warned. The survivors were still acting like they could reclaim the land, but God shut that down. "Y'all refused to obey me, shed blood, worshipped idols, and did whatever you wanted. Now you think you still have a right to this land? No, judgment has already come." Finally, God called out the people who liked listening to Ezekiel's words but didn't take them seriously. They come to hear you like it's entertainment, nodding along, but they don't actually change. They treat my words like a nice song, something they enjoy but don't live by. But when all I've warned about comes to pass, they'll know a prophet was among them. Moral of the story: God gives warnings, but it's up to you to listen. Past righteousness won't save you if you turn to sin, and past sin won't destroy you if you turn back to God. He wants to save, not destroy, but the choice is in your hands. Don't just hear the word, live it. Ezekiel 34. God told Ezekiel, "Call out the shepherds of Israel, the leaders who were supposed to take care of my people. Instead of leading with wisdom and love, they've been using their position for their own gain. They feed themselves while the flock goes hungry. They don't protect the weak, heal the sick, or seek out the lost. Instead, they rule with force and cruelty. So now, my sheep are scattered, wandering without a shepherd and easy prey for the enemies." Then God said, "I've had enough. These so-called shepherds will be removed. I will personally step in and take care of my sheep. I will bring them back from exile, feed them, protect them, and give them rest. The lost will be found, the broken will be healed, and justice will be served. But as for the ones who abuse their power, their time is up." God also spoke to the fat, greedy sheep, the people who took advantage of the weak. "You pushed aside the weak, took the best for yourselves, and left nothing for the rest. I'm bringing judgment to separate the good from the bad. No more oppression, no more corruption." Then God gave a promise of a true shepherd. "I will raise up one shepherd over them, my servant David. He will lead with righteousness, and under him my people will finally have peace. They will live in safety, no more fear, no more suffering. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and they will know that I am the Lord." Moral of the story: God holds leaders accountable. If you use your position for selfish gain instead of serving others, judgment is coming. But for those who trust in him, he promises to be the good shepherd, protecting, providing, and leading his people to true peace. And the ultimate shepherd? That's Jesus, the fulfillment of God's promise. Ezekiel 35. God gave Ezekiel a message for Mount Seir, the land of Edom, saying, "I'm coming for you." He said, "You hated Israel and celebrated when they fell. You took advantage of their downfall, thinking you could claim their land. But now, your time is up. I will make your land a wasteland, and no one will live there again. Your cities will be empty, and you will know that I am the Lord." God continued, "You had an ancient hatred for my people. When they were weak, you attacked them instead of helping. You thought nobody was watching, but I saw it all. Now the same destruction you cheered for is coming to your doorstep." Then he said, "While the whole world rejoices, you'll be left in ruins. You thought you could take over Israel's land? That land belongs to my people, and I will bring them back. But you'll be wiped out forever." Moral of the story: never celebrate someone else's downfall, especially when God is dealing with them. If you take advantage of others in their weakest moments, you're setting yourself up for judgment. God sees everything, and he will handle those who move with hatred and selfishness. Ezekiel 36. God told Ezekiel to speak to the mountains of Israel, saying, "You've been mocked, trampled, and taken over by enemy nations. They laughed at your downfall and claimed your land as their own. But now, I'm stepping in." God declared, "I will bring my people back. The nations that insulted you will be punished, and Israel will flourish again. The land will be full of life, fruitful, abundant, and restored. No longer will you be seen as cursed." Then God spoke about why he was doing this. "It's not because Israel deserves it, but because my name has been disrespected among the nations. They saw my people fall and thought I was weak. So now I'm restoring Israel to show them who I am." God made a powerful promise. I will cleanse you from your sin and idols. I will give you a new heart and put my spirit in you. You will follow my ways, not out of fear, but because I've transformed you. You will truly be my people, and I will be your God. He continued, the land that was ruined will be rebuilt. What was once desolate will be like the Garden of Eden. The nations will see this and know that I, the Lord, have spoken and will do it. Moral of the story. God restores not because we deserve it, but because of His grace. He can take what's broken and make it new. He doesn't just fix situations. He changes hearts, giving people a fresh start. If you've fallen, don't count yourself out. God can still bring you back and make you better than before. Ezekiel 37. God took Ezekiel to a valley full of dry bones and asked, "Can these bones live again?" Ezekiel answered, "Lord, only you know." Then God told him, "Prophesy to these bones. Tell them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. I will put breath in you, give you flesh, and bring you back to life." So Ezekiel spoke, and suddenly the bones started rattling, coming together. Muscles and skin formed over them, but they still had no breath. Then God said, "Prophesy to the wind. Call my spirit to breathe life into them." Ezekiel did, and they stood up, an army, fully alive. God explained, "These bones are Israel. They thought they were finished, dried up with no hope. But I am bringing them back to life, returning them to their land, and filling them with my spirit. Then they will know that I am the Lord." Then God gave Ezekiel another sign. He told him to take 2 sticks, one for Judah and one for Ephraim, Israel, and hold them together as one. "I will reunite my people," God said. "No more division, no more idols. I will be their God, and they will be my people." God promised, "I will place my servant David as their king forever." This points to Jesus, the true king from David's line. "I will make a covenant of peace with them, and my presence will always be with them. The nations will see that I am the Lord when my people are restored." Moral of the story. No situation is too dead for God to revive. What looks hopeless, He can restore. Whether it's a person, a family, or an entire nation, He can breathe life into what seems finished. Trust that God's power can turn dry bones into an army. Ezekiel 38. God gave Ezekiel a prophecy about Gog, a powerful leader from the land of Magog, who would one day rise up against Israel. God said, "Gog, I am against you. I will put hooks in your jaws and drag you into battle. You and your massive army, Persia, Cush, Put, and others, will come like a storm covering the land." But then God revealed His plan. "You think it's your idea to attack Israel, but I'm the one setting you up. My people will be living in peace, unprotected, thinking they have nothing to fear. And you'll see an easy target and decide to invade. But when you do, my fury will rise up. I will shake the earth with earthquakes, send floods, fire, and hailstones. Your army will turn on itself in confusion. The whole world will witness my power, and they will know that I am the Lord." Moral of the story. Even the strongest enemies are under God's control. What looks like a major threat is just another setup for God to show His power. No enemy, no army, no plan can stand against Him. When God is on your side, victory is guaranteed. Ezekiel 39. God told Ezekiel, "Son of man, prophesy against Gog. You thought you were running things, but I'm the one bringing you to this battle. When you attack my people, I will strike you down. Your army will fall in the mountains of Israel, and the birds and wild animals will feast on your bodies." God continued, "I will send fire on Magog and the nations that stand with them. Everyone will know that I am the Lord. No more excuses, no more false gods. My name will be made holy among the nations. Then God described how Israel would clean up after the battle. It will take 7 years to burn all the weapons. The people won't even need firewood. They'll use the enemy's weapons for fuel. And for 7 months, they'll be burying the dead in a place called the Valley of Gog's Multitude. God then spoke about restoring Israel. Though they were scattered and punished for their sins, I never abandoned them. Now I will bring them back, cleanse them, and pour out my Spirit on them. They will never be ashamed again, and the world will know that I am their God. Moral of the story: God always has the final say. No enemy is too strong for him, and no situation is too far gone for him to restore. When God fights for you, the battle is already won, and when he restores, he does it completely. Trust in his power and his promises. Ezekiel 40. In the 25th year of Israel's exile, God took Ezekiel in a vision to a high mountain overlooking Jerusalem. There he saw a man shining like bronze, holding a measuring rod, ready to show him a new temple. The man told Ezekiel, "Pay attention, listen closely, and write down everything you see." Then Ezekiel was led through the temple, where every part was carefully measured. The outer wall, thick and strong, showing God's protection. The east gate, where God's glory would return. The north and south gates, perfectly designed for worshipers to enter. The courtyards, where sacrifices would be offered again. The priests' rooms, set apart for those serving God. The temple itself, sacred, detailed, and full of God's presence. Every inch of this new temple was built with purpose and perfection, symbolizing God's restored relationship with his people. Moral of the story: even after judgment, God has a plan for restoration. This vision wasn't just about a building, it was about God's presence returning to be with his people. When God restores, he does it with order, purpose, and power. No matter how broken things seem, he can rebuild better than before. Ezekiel 41. Ezekiel continued his vision of the new temple as the man measured the inner sanctuary, the holiest part of the temple where God's presence would dwell. The main hall, holy place, spacious and beautifully designed. The most holy place, a perfect square, set apart for God's presence. Thick walls, separating the holy from the common, emphasizing God's holiness. Side rooms, built around the temple, possibly for priests or sacred storage. Wooden panels and carvings, walls decorated with palm trees and cherubim, angels, symbolizing life and divine protection. The entire structure reflected God's perfection, order, and holiness, a place where his people could truly worship him again. Moral of the story: God's presence is sacred, and he calls his people to holiness. This temple wasn't just about a building, it was a symbol of God restoring his relationship with his people. When God rebuilds, he does it with beauty, order, and purpose, and he wants to dwell with us. Make your life a place where his presence can stay. Ezekiel 42. Ezekiel was led to the outer court, where he saw rooms for the priests. These were special chambers set aside for those who served in the temple, where they could eat the holy offerings and change into sacred garments before going back among the people. Long rooms on the north and south sides for the priests who handled offerings. A sacred space, so the priests wouldn't mix holy duties with common life. Careful design. Everything in the temple was arranged with purpose. After showing Ezekiel these rooms, the man measured the entire temple complex, making it clear that this was a holy place, set apart for God's presence. Moral of the story: God values order, holiness, and separation between the sacred and the ordinary. This wasn't just about a building. It was about preparing a space where God's people could honor Him properly. If you want God's presence in your life, you have to set apart space for Him. Ezekiel 43. Then Ezekiel saw something amazing, the glory of God returning to the temple. God's presence came from the east, shining bright like fire, with a sound like rushing waters. The whole land lit up with His glory as He entered the temple. Ezekiel fell face down in awe. God spoke, "Son of man, this is my throne, my dwelling place among my people. No more idolatry, no more wicked kings disrespecting my name. From now on, my people must keep this place holy." Then God gave Ezekiel instructions for the altar, how to purify it and prepare it for sacrifices. For 7 days, the priests would make offerings to cleanse it, and after that, God would accept their worship again. Moral of the story: God's presence isn't just about a place, it's about holiness and obedience. He wants to dwell among His people, but we must make room for Him by removing sin and honoring Him. When we do, He will restore and dwell with us. Ezekiel 44. God took Ezekiel to the east gate of the temple, but it was shut. God said, "This gate stays closed because I, the Lord, have entered through it. No one else can use it." However, the prince, a special ruler, would be allowed to sit near it and eat in God's presence. Then, God gave strict rules about who could serve in His temple. The Levites who turned away and let the people worship idols. They could still work in the temple, but only in lower roles. They had lost the right to come near God's presence. The faithful priests from Zadok's family, they were allowed to serve directly before God, offering sacrifices and teaching the people His laws. God told the priests they must keep themselves holy. No drinking on duty, no marrying outside of Israel, and no disrespecting my commands. They will teach my people right from wrong and settle disputes according to my laws. Finally, God said, "The priests won't own land like everyone else. I am their inheritance. Their focus is me." Moral of the story: not everyone who claims to serve God is truly faithful. Some do the bare minimum, while others stay committed no matter what. God honors those who stay loyal to Him. If you want to be close to God, live in a way that proves you're serious about Him. Ezekiel 45. God gave Ezekiel instructions on how the land should be divided, making sure there was a holy portion set apart for Him. A special section for the temple, a sacred space where God's presence would dwell. Land for the priests and Levites, so they could live near the temple and serve God. A portion for the prince, leader, but unlike past corrupt rulers, this prince wouldn't oppress the people. Then, God commanded the leaders of Israel, "Stop cheating and robbing the people. Rule with justice, use honest weights and measures, and treat my people fairly." God also laid out the offerings the people should bring, grain, oil, and lambs, to keep the temple and worship going. These offerings weren't just rituals, they were about honoring God and keeping His presence among them. Moral of the story: God expects justice, fairness, and integrity from those in leadership. Worship isn't just about rituals, it's about a heart that respects God and treats others right. If you want to honor God, live with honesty and fairness in everything you do. Ezekiel 46. God gave Ezekiel more instructions about worship in the new temple and how things should be handled with order and respect. Sabbath and worship rules. The east gate of the temple would stay closed all week but be opened on the Sabbath and special feast days for worship. The prince, leader of Israel, would enter through the gate, worship at the entrance, and then leave the same way. The people would also worship on these days, entering through one gate and leaving through another, symbolizing moving forward in God's presence. Rules for the prince. If the prince gave land to his sons, it was theirs permanently. If he gave land to his servants, they would have to return it in the year of Jubilee, a year of reset. No more corrupt leaders stealing from the people. The prince must rule with justice. Temple kitchens. Ezekiel was shown kitchens inside the temple where priests would cook the sacrifices for the people. This way, the holy offerings wouldn't be mixed with the common food. Morale of the story. Worship isn't random. It should be done with order, respect, and a heart that honors God. Leaders must serve the people, not take from them. And when you enter God's presence, don't leave the same way you came. Real worship brings real change. Ezekiel 47, the river of life. Ezekiel saw water flowing from the temple, starting as a small stream but growing deeper and stronger as it moved outward. At first, ankle deep, then knee deep, then waist deep. Finally, so deep you had to swim. God said, "This river brings life wherever it goes. The Dead Sea, where nothing lives, will be filled with fresh water, teeming with fish. Trees will grow along its banks, bearing fruit every month. Their leaves will be for healing." Dividing the land. God then told Ezekiel how Israel's land would be restored. Each tribe would get a fair share. Foreigners living among them would be included in the inheritance. God was making room for everyone. Moral of the story. God's presence brings life, healing, and restoration. Just like the river started small but grew deeper, the more you walk with God, the more His Spirit transforms you. No situation is too dead for Him to revive. Wherever His presence flows, new life begins. Ezekiel 48, the division of the land. God gave Ezekiel the final layout for Israel's restored land, ensuring that each of the 12 tribes got their fair share. The land was divided equally, with special areas set aside for God, the priests, and the prince. The special sections. A holy portion in the center was for the temple, priests, and Levites. The prince's land was near the temple, making sure leaders stayed close to God. Foreigners who lived among Israel were also given land, showing that God's kingdom was open to all. The New Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem was rebuilt, and it had 12 gates, one for each tribe. But the most important part, the city's new name. The Lord is there, Yahweh Shammah. Moral of the story. God always keeps His promises. Even after judgment, He restores His people and provides a future full of order, fairness, and His presence. The most important blessing isn't just the land. It's God Himself living among His people. Where God is, there is peace, restoration, and life.